In this video I will show you how to recreate this viral animation from Creatoroly. If you scrolled on Instagram, you most likely seen one of his videos. So open your After Effects and follow along because you will learn a lot in this video. All the assets used are down in the description. So without further ado, let's jump straight into the video. So first we need a background. So right click and add a new solid, drag a 4-color gradient on it, make all the colors white and move these points like so. Then set these middle colors to a light gray. Select the rectangle tool and draw a white square shape like so. Align it to the middle of the screen, scale it up a bit and increase the roundness. Press Ctrl+T to grab your text tool and write joy. Change the font to Wolf Sans and change the color to this light red. Then scale it down and place it to the middle of the shape like so. To make our numbers rotation, create a circle at the bottom of the square, write down the number 6 and make it black, then simply position it like so. Duplicate it, write down the number 7 and move it to the right, but also rotate it like this. Duplicate it again, write down the number 8, then move it to the right and rotate it. Finally, duplicate it again, write down the number 9, move it to the right and rotate it like so. Now we want the numbers to show only inside the white shape. Select all of the layers, click toggle switches and modes, then drag this track matte whip on the shape layer. Duplicate the shape layer and click this view button to enable it. Rename the layer below track matte and parent it to the main placeholder. And now if we rotate the circle, the numbers will rotate with it. Now to get rid of the circle, simply go up here to the fill and disable it. The last part that we need to do in this scene before animating it is to make that red circle pop behind the shape layer. So hold click on the shape tools and select the ellipse tool. Then create a circle just like this. Center it to the middle, make the color this light red, place the layer behind everything and drop the opacity to 50. Drag the layer forward just a tiny bit, that's where the animation will start. And now that our scene is designed, we need to animate it. First, track matte the joy text layer to the matte layer as well. Go forward, keyframe the main shape layer scale, then go back and drop it off to 50. Then, keyframe the opacity, move it forward a bit and start it at 0. Select the scale keyframes and bounce them using Bouncr. It's a free plugin and it's very helpful, so I'll leave it in the description as well. Also, make sure to turn on the motion blur. Now, keyframe the circle scale, move back and start it at 44. Then, keyframe the opacity at 46, move forward and decrease it to 0. Select the scale keyframes, press F9 to smooth them out and turn on the motion blur. To animate the text, move the layer forward when you want to start it, keyframe the scale, move it forward, then go back and start it at 0. Select the keyframes and bounce them. Also, turn on the motion blur. Now to make the numbers rotate, keyframe the rotation, move the keyframe back and drag the rotation until the number 9 is in the middle. Select the keyframes and press F9 to smooth them out. Also, keyframe the opacity for the number 6, move it a bit forward and start it at 0. And don't forget to turn on the motion blur. And this is what we ended up with. Now that we designed and animated our first scene, it's finally time to transition into the next one. Right click and create a null object. Make all the layers 3D except the background and parent all the layers to the null, except for the numbers and the background. Then I will color all the layers yellow so I stay organized. Keyframe the position and the X rotation, then move forward and set it like this so the icon isn't visible anymore. Also, keyframe the Y rotation, move forward and tilt it this way. Then select all of the keyframes and press F9 to smooth them out. Go into the speed graph and drag all the handles to the end like this. Then go to the background layers and keyframe the colors like so. Copy and paste them 2 more times and go to the middle keyframes and change it to this light pink. Select all of the number and text layers, keyframe the opacity, then move a frame forward and turn them down to 0. Expand the opacity tab and copy the opacity keyframes. And then paste them onto the placeholder layers to fade them out. And now everything is set up for the next scene, so let's get into that. Select the rectangle tool and draw a small square like this. Center it in the middle and change the color to white. Add in this plus icon, by the way you will have all the assets down in the description, and fit it into the square. Then go into the properties tab and increase the roundness all the way up. Add the fill onto the plus icon and make it this dark gray. I will change the color of the layers to pink just to stay organized. Now create a null object and parent the shape layer and the placeholder to it. Make all of them 3D, increase the X rotation on the null object just like we did earlier with the calendar. Go where the calendar starts to transition and keyframe the X rotation for the new null. Keyframe the position as well, move the keyframe forward and match it with the calendar's position. Keyframe the Y rotation as well and orient it just like the calendar, then go forward and reset everything to 0. Select all of the keyframes, F9 to smooth them out and turn on the motion blur. Then go into the speed graph and start it very fast, just like this. And now we got this cool transition between the scenes. Now to create the plus icon, go back where the animation starts and keyframe the position. Move the keyframe forward and start it at -59. Then, keyframe the Z rotation as well, start it at 1, move forward and end it at 0. Select all of the keyframes, F9 to smooth them out, turn on the motion blur and go into the speed graph. Then, drag the last handles forward to start it fast. Now, duplicate the placeholder and rename it. Set the color to this light gray, keyframe the scale, move it forward, then start it at 0. Select the keyframes and easy ease them with F9. Also, turn on the motion blur. Go to the null layer and keyframe the current position. Go forward and drop the position down like so. Select the keyframes and press F9 to smooth them out. Go into the speed graph and start it fast. And now it's time to design the scene with the tasks. Grab the rectangle tool and draw a small square like this. Remove the fill and enable the stroke. Set the color to this darker gray and increase the roundness a bit. Drop down the contents, go into the stroke properties and click on this plus for dashes. Also, put the line cap to round cap. Press Ctrl+T for the text tool and write out plan a day. Scale it down a bit and adjust it accordingly. Select the pen tool and draw a straight line like so. Go down into contents, then stroke and click the dashes button and also make the line cap to round cap. Rename everything so we stay organized and also change the color of the layers. Duplicate the square with Ctrl+D and place it under the other box. Then duplicate the text, change it to drink water and place it under like so. Duplicate the line as well and place it under both of the layers. Do the same thing to the other task and change the color of the layer to green. As you can see, they're not in the middle of the screen, so let's center them real quick. Create a new null and parent all the layers that we just created to it. Press P for position and center them in the middle of the screen. Also, move them up a bit because we need to add one more task. Drag this moon icon into the composition, scale it down and drag it under the sunlight task. Duplicate the dotted line and place it under the moon. Then, duplicate the text, change it to wind down and place it next to the moon icon. Also, change the color of the layers to stay organized. And now that we designed our scene, it's finally time to animate it. Drag all the layers here where the animation needs to start, drag a Gaussian blur onto the dotted square, keyframe the blurriness and the opacity. Press U on the keyboard to see all the keyframes and drag the keyframes forward like so. Then, set the opacity at 0 and increase the blur at 15. Keyframe the position, move it forward, and start it to the left just a tiny bit. Select the position keyframes and bounce them using Bouncr, and also turn on the motion blur. Go into the effect controls and set the amplitude to 20. Move the playhead just a tiny forward and drag the next square where it should begin. Copy the opacity keyframes and paste them, and also copy the blur keyframes and paste them. Last but not least, keyframe the position, drag it forward, and start it a bit to the left. Select the first keyframe, F9 to smooth it out, then select the last keyframe and bounce it. Set the amplitude to 20 and enable the motion blur as well. Now do the same to the last box, move the playhead a bit forward, drag the layer, copy the keyframes, paste them, keyframe the position, move it forward, start it to the left, move the first keyframe, bounce the second one and enable the motion blur. And now let's take care of the text. Move the playhead where the first square finishes animating and drag the layer. Drop down this arrow and click on animate. Select the position and move it to the right. Then click on animate again and select the opacity. Drag it down to 0, click on animate, select the blur and set it at 15. Then click on add, selector and expression. Hold Alt on your keyboard and click on this stopwatch and paste in this expression. Turn on the motion blur and we got this. Hold down shift and select every property like I do. Ctrl+C to copy them, drag the drink water text a bit forward and paste the properties keyframes. Move the playhead a bit forward, drag the get sunlight text forward and paste the property keyframes on it as well. Finally, turn on the motion blur for all of the text layers and we got this. And now let's take care of the dotted lines. Move the playhead where the text starts to come in and keyframe the opacity. Move it forward and start it at 0. Select the keyframes and copy them, then drag the next dotted line forward and paste the keyframes. Last but not least, we need to animate the last task. Duplicate this null, change its name and color, then parent the wind down text and the icon to it. Keyframe the position, move it forward and start them a bit up. Select the keyframes, F9 to smooth them out and turn on the motion blur. Drop down the opacity for the text and icon, drag the layers forward and keyframe it. Move it forward and start it at 0. Select the position keyframes from the null, go into the speed graph and start them fast. Drag the dotted line layer forward, keyframe the opacity, move it forward and start it at 0. And we end up with this. Now it's time to transition into the next scene, so let's get into that. Drag in this cursor icon, scale it down and rotate it like so. Move it off the screen to the right and move the layer where the animation should start. Keyframe the position and the rotation, move forward, rotate it a bit and place it here. Turn on the motion blur and the 3D, select the keyframes and easy ease them with F9. Go into the speed graph and start it fast. Then, select the pen tool and place a point in the middle of the path. Then, drag the point to create a curve like so. Grab your rectangle tool and draw a big square like so. Rename it and color it with this light black. Increase the roundness like so and also place the cursor layer over it. Scroll down and keyframe the background color as well. Move forward and make all of the colors full black. Keyframe the scale, move it forward and start it at 0. Select the keyframes, turn on the motion blur and bounce them. Keyframe the opacity, move the keyframe forward and start it at 0. Add a fill onto the plan a day text, make it black, keyframe the color, move forward and change it to white. Then, keyframe the opacity for the dotted line, move forward and end it at 0. Now, select all of the task layers that are below, keyframe the current opacity, move a bit forward and end it at 0. Then, do the same for the gray button layers, select the keyframe, the opacity and fade them out. Now for the cursor, go to the latest keyframe and place it above the box, and also rotate it to be straight. Go forward a bit and put the cursor on the dotted box, and rotate it back like so. Copy the previous keyframes and paste them a bit forward to create momentum. Select the shape layer and draw a small square here, like so. Make it this light gray and increase the roundness. Duplicate it and place it in the middle. Then, click this button to unlink the scale and scale it horizontally. Do the same for the previous square, duplicate it again and place it to the right. Grab the black shape holder and scale it horizontally as well. Then, align these little squares just like so. Now, press Ctrl+T for the text tool and write out complete. Change the font to SFUI text and color it with this light gray color. Scale it down and fit it in this first square. Drag in this checkbox icon, scale it down and fit it in the square as well. Add a fill on it and change the color to this light gray. Adjust the icon and the text to be in the middle of the square just like so. Now, duplicate the text, drag it into the middle of the square and change it to edit. Bring in this pen icon, scale it down, copy the fill from the other icon and paste it on the pen. Then, place it in the square. Duplicate the text again, drag it into the right square and write out remove. Bring in the remove icon, copy the fill from the previous icon and paste it on this one. Scale it down and fit it into the right square. Now, rename the first square and bring it under the complete layers. Select the text and the icon and parent them to the square below them. Then, rename the second square and bring it under the edit layers. Select the text and the icon and parent them. And finally, rename the third square and select the text and the icon and parent them to the square below them. And now to animate them, drag the complete layers where the animation should start, keyframe the scale for the first square, move the keyframe forward and start it at 0. Select the keyframes and bounce them. Also, set the amplitude to 35. Move a bit forward and drag the edit layer here. Keyframe the scale for the second square, move it forward and start it at 0. Select the keyframes and bounce them. Turn on the motion blur and set the amplitude to 35. Finally, drag the remove layers here, keyframe the scale for the third square, move it forward and start it at 0. Select the keyframes, bounce them and turn on the motion blur. Don't forget to set the amplitude to 35. Add a tint effect on the remove text and make the colors this light pink. Add a deep glow, set the exposure to 0.05 and the radius to 500. Last but not least, copy the tint from the text and paste it on the square. Make the top color black and drop the tint exposure to 35. Add a deep glow, set the exposure to 0.05 and the radius to 500. Then increase the tint amount to 95 instead of 35. And now it's time to do the emoji animations. Import the emojis into the composition, check the layers where the animation should start and place them like so. Let's start by rotating the coffee like so and moving it a bit down. Move the controller up a bit and rotate it like so. Drag the ball closer and rotate it as well. Move the monitor down here, scale it down and rotate it. Copy the deep glow from the remove text and paste it on the icons. Keyframe the position and rotation for all of them, move the keyframes forward and start them by rotating every single one of them and placing them together like so. Select the keyframes, F9 to smooth them out, add the Gaussian blur on the coffee and set it to 15. Keyframe the blurriness, move forward and drop it down to 0. Select the Gaussian blur, copy it and paste it on the other emojis. Keyframe the opacity as well, move forward a bit, put a keyframe there as well, then move forward and place keyframes again. End it and start it at 0 and leave the middle ones at 100. Select all of the emojis and place them behind the black square. And we end up with this. Now select the pen tool and draw a straight line over the text like this. Disable the fill, enable the stroke, make it this dark gray and increase it at 11 pixels. Drop down this arrow, go into the contents, stroke and make the line cap into a round cap. Enable the motion blur and rename the layer. Click on add and select the trim paths function. Keyframe the end, move it forward and start it at 0. Select the keyframes, F9 to smoothen them out, then go into the speed graph and start it fast. Create a null object and parent all the layers that are apart from this black square to it. Select all of the layers except the background and make them 3D. Keyframe the X rotation for the null that you just created. Move forward and increase the X rotation just like so. Select the keyframes, F9 to smoothen them out, go into the speed graph and end it fast. Also, turn on the motion blur. Select all of the layers that belong to the square, keyframe the opacity, move forward and set it to 0 to fade them out. And now it's finally time for the last scene. Scroll down and keyframe the colors of the background. Move forward and change all of them to white. Create a one node camera, then create a null object, turn on the 3D and the motion blur and parent the camera to it. Keyframe the position, move forward and set it to -100. Then, go to the first keyframe and zoom out the position like so. Select the keyframes and press F9 to smoothen them out. Create a new null object, turn on the 3D and the motion blur and parent the previous one to it. Put your playhead around here and keyframe the position. Move forward and zoom in like so. Select the keyframes and press F9 to ease them. Create a null object again, turn on the 3D and the motion blur and parent the previous one to it. Move your playhead here and keyframe the position. Then, move forward and zoom out. Select the keyframes and press F9 to ease them. Once again, create a null object, turn on the 3D and the motion blur and parent the previous one to it. Keyframe the position around this point, move forward and bring it down just a tiny bit like this. Select the keyframes and press F9 to smooth them out, then go into the speed graph and start it fast. And now, can you guess what I'll do next? Create a null object, turn on the 3D and the motion blur and parent the previous one to it. Keyframe the position here, move forward and make sure this box is in the middle. Also zoom out a bit. Select the keyframes, F9 to smooth them out, open the speed graph and make sure it starts fast. Press Ctrl+T on your keyboard for the text tool and type get your subscription. Make sure to use the SFUI font and select the medium one. Align it in the middle of your screen and scale it up a bit. Move the layer below the camera and drag it where the animation should start. Click on this arrow, then click on animate and select position. Set the position to -50, click again on animate and select the opacity. Make sure that the opacity is 0%. Then go into add, selector and click on expression. Hold Alt on your keyboard and press on the stopwatch, then paste the same expression that you did earlier. Click here where it says based on and select words. Make the layer 3D and add a fill to it. Keyframe the color before the animation begins. Move forward and change the color to black. Then select the keyframes and ease them with F9. And the final step is to... guess what? You're right, create a null object, make it 3D and turn on the motion blur. Keyframe the position, move forward and zoom in onto the text. Select the keyframes and press F9 to smooth them out. And congratulations, you end up with these amazing edits. If you want to see more content like this, make sure to subscribe and tell me in the comment section what video should I do next.